So put away your makeup. Told you once, I won't tell you again. It's the bad way. Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. You don't have to put on the red light. Roxanne, Roxanne, Roxanne,
Hold me close, hold me tight, make me thrill with delight.
A little bit harder to buy a home. The world I grew up in was one where I think for the first time really in American history, my parents' generation did not expect their children to necessarily have a better life than they did. And you saw that in all kinds of different ways, but there was this sense growing up in Middletown in the 1990s that a lot of people didn't expect the future to be better than the past, and that's a really unique and a really tragic thing. The jobs started to disappear from that community, drugs started to move in, hopelessness started to move in, and so a lot of people who really knew that the future would be better than the past actually found a world that was a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging. I wrote Hillbilly Elegy because I wanted to give people a sense of what it was like to live in a community like mine. I didn't think a whole lot of stories were told about white working class Americans. I didn't think a lot of stories were told about people who were struggling with some of the problems we were struggling with, joblessness, drug addiction, and so forth. And I thought that I could tell a story that would make people understand my family a little bit better, and maybe in the process, understand the struggles of a lot of families. I come from the places that I want to represent, and what we need is to stop sending people that are of the DC swamp. We need to send people who are of the places they aim to represent. I want to fight for the people that I come from.
The American media has been laundering foreign disinformation. It is disgusting. Instead of talking about the crises in our country, they try to silence the people who are experiencing them. Who do you want answering the phone? Do you want a person who hides from the friendly American media, or do you want a person who takes a bullet to the head and stands up and says, fight, fight, fight? Kamala Harris, you ought to have respect enough for your own people to enforce their border laws and listen to them. Listen to them when they complain about it. Don't pretend they're bad people. We're not bad people for loving this country. You're a bad person for doing this to the country in the first place.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the next Vice President and Second Lady of the United States, Senator J.D. Vance and Usha Vance.
Why don't we liberate these United States? We're the ones who need it worst. Let the rest of the world help us for change, and let's rebuild America first. Our highways and bridges are falling apart.
Wow, this is beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Look, this is a beautiful place to close out the campaign in Michigan. I am sorry to say that this is the last time that I will be in Michigan as a vice presidential candidate. But if we go out and do our job tomorrow, I'll come back as Vice President of the United States of America. Let's do that. Now, we have got, of course, some special guests here, and you guys have got some great candidates and great local leaders. I want to recognize them before we get started. We've got Michigan's next senator, a guy who's run a hell of a campaign and is a very good guy, Mike Rogers. Mike, thank you so much for being here, for your leadership. Thank you, man. We've got Representative Lisa McLean. Where are you, Lisa? It's very bright, very hard for me to see out there, so I'm just going to trust that Lisa's out there. Congressional candidate Tom Barrett. Tom, where are you? Thank you, Tom. God bless you, man. And Paul Young. Paul, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. We love you, Paul. And we've got my favorite guy in the state of Michigan right now, the GOP chair, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, thank you so much, man. You're doing a good job. And last but certainly not least, my favorite person, no offense to anybody here, but we've got my beautiful wife, Usha. Thank you so much, honey, for being here and for... It's good to get to run for vice president. It's even better to do it with your best friend by your side. So I love you, honey. Thank you for making this such a good experience. And most importantly, we got one more day, my friends, one more day. And here's the thing, as I understand it, early voting is over in the great state of Michigan. So we got to get out there tomorrow and take every single person you know. We're going to get out there tomorrow, Michigan, and vote, every single one of us, 10 times. That's what I want you to do. In the state of Michigan. No, I mean the legal way. The media, we don't want the Detroit Free Press to write that I came to Flint, Michigan and encourage voter fraud. Here's how we're going to vote legally 10 times. You're going to take yourself to the polls tomorrow, take 9 of your friends and family with you, and we're going to make Donald J. Trump the next president. Now, driving through Flint, Michigan, I couldn't help but feel a certain familiarity because even though I believe this is the first time I've ever been in Flint, Michigan, I know that the story of Flint is unfortunately the story of way too many communities all across the state of Michigan, and it's the story of my community in Middletown, Ohio, which is that for too long, a generation of American leaders has failed to do their job for communities like Flint, Michigan. For too long, we have been left behind, we have been ignored, we have been neglected. We have had a generation of American leaders who have shipped American jobs overseas and brought in millions upon millions of illegal aliens. Well, in just tomorrow, that is going to stop because when we bring Donald J. Trump back to the White House, we're going to put our citizens first. I mean, look at this beautiful building. You know how lucky we are to have come from a generation of, hundreds of years. The people of the United States of America, they built places like this. I'm overwhelmed by it. You know, you go all different places when you run for vice president of the United States, but we're driving downtown Flint. And all I could think is, St. Paul's Episcopal Church. We know St. Paul's Episcopal Church. I'd never seen it before in my life. I drove by it on the way out here, and I thought, we have the most beautiful country in the world. And for hundreds of years, Americans built beautiful buildings because we wanted our citizens and our people to be surrounded by a reminder that we have the capacity in the United States of America to do great things. We are descended from the people who with pocket calculators and slide rulers built rockets to go to the moon. We are descendants of people who built this beautiful building, who built all of these wonderful structures in Flint, Michigan, but unfortunately, a generation of leaders like Kamala Harris have decided that we don't need to make enough of our own stuff in the United States of America anymore. And we know the consequences of it. We know that a generation of middle-class Americans lost their jobs. We know that a lot of our people are struggling to get by. We know that our fellow citizens can't afford to buy groceries, can't afford to buy housing, can't afford to put food on the table because people like Kamala Harris failed to do their job. Well, tomorrow, we get an opportunity to send a message to those people. We don't want you anymore. We want Americans who care about their fellow citizens. That's what Donald J. Trump offers. Look, I got to be honest with you. I saw Tim Walz a couple days ago in Las Vegas, Nevada. We were both arriving in beautiful Las Vegas airport at the exact same time. And, I actually feel bad for Governor Tim Walz, if I'm being honest with you, because think about this. He's got the toughest job in American politics, maybe one of the toughest jobs in America, period. He's got to go around the United States of America and pretend that Kamala Harris is fit to be president of the United States. And I know, look, think about it. I know a lot of us have had hard days at work. Our hands hurt, our backs are tired, but have you ever had the kind of day where you had to tell people that Kamala Harris was able to be the president of the United States? That's tough work, my friends. But here's the thing, you know, we don't have to guess at what Kamala Harris's leadership is going to be like. We don't have to pretend that the slogans and what she says with a teleprompter in front of her is the reality. We know exactly what Kamala Harris is going to do because she's already been doing it for the last 4 years. And what is the consequence of Kamala Harris's leadership? What does Tim Walz have to go around America and pretend that Kamala Harris has been doing? Well, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris and trillions of dollars of new spending, our fellow citizens can't afford to buy groceries, that gas prices are up by 45%. Did you see the jobs report that came out just a couple of days ago? 28,000 private sector jobs that we lost. 46,000 American manufacturing jobs lost in the United States of America. But you know the only category where we gained employment was the government. So under Kamala Harris's economy, our good, hardworking Michigan citizens, they're losing their jobs. Our great Michigan auto workers are losing their jobs, but Kamala Harris's government bureaucrats are doing just fine. And look, I don't wish unemployment on anybody. I know it's terribly stressful to lose a job, but the one person that I think that we're going to make unemployed tomorrow is Kamala Harris because we don't want her anywhere near the Oval Office. So say a prayer if you're a praying type. Say a prayer for Tim Walz because he's got the toughest job in American politics. And meanwhile, I've got the easiest job in American politics. Because think about this. I don't just have to tell you about Donald Trump's plans, even though we've got a lot of great plans. I just have to talk about the record of Donald J. Trump in office. When Donald Trump was in office, inflation was at 1.5%. The dollar went as far as it's ever gone in the United States of America. When Donald J. Trump was president, wages were rising faster than they had in 40 years in the United States of America. And when Donald J. Trump was president, the border was secure and the Mexican drug cartels were on the run. That's a hell of a record to run on. So I've got the easiest job. I've just got to try to convince our fellow citizens all over the state of Michigan, all over the United States of America, that if we get back to the common sense policies of Donald J. Trump, we can get back to the peace and prosperity of that leadership. And I do believe, my friends, that we are on the cusp of a golden age of American prosperity. We're on the cusp of an America where we're not just energy independent, but we're energy dominant. We're on the cusp. We're ready to make the American dream of homeownership affordable for millions of young Americans all over the state of Michigan and all over America. But the thing that we've got to do, the only thing that we can do to unleash that golden age of American prosperity is to get Donald J. Trump back in the White House. So let's go and do it, and let's do it together. You know, if you just run through the statistics of what's going on, we talked about the jobs numbers, but you know that the credit card delinquency rate in this country is now north of 9%. That means that over 1 in 11 of our fellow citizens cannot afford to pay their bills. 1 in 8 auto loans are in delinquency right now. That means a lot of our fellow citizens can't afford to make their car payment because of Kamala Harris's economic policies. This election is not just about giving the American people a better president, though that's obviously a big part of it. This election is fundamentally about whether the American dream is going to be affordable for our fellow citizens. And I think that we have got to do better. There are so many people out there that are struggling. I know in the city of Flint and all over this great state, there are a lot of people who are working hard, they're playing by the rules, and they're falling further behind instead of getting further ahead. Wouldn't it be nice to have a president of the United States who made it easier for American citizens who work hard and play by the rules to afford the American dream again? Wouldn't it be nice, instead of having Kamala Harris, who'd like to buy oil and gas from tin pot dictators all over the world, to have a president who wants to buy American energy from American workers and from American territory? We got plenty of it. And you know, when they ask Kamala Harris, I feel bad sometimes when I watch these Kamala Harris interviews, because they'll say, well, Kamala Harris, what is your exact plan to make groceries and prescription drugs and gasoline affordable again? What is your specific plan to fix what you've been breaking over the last 4 years? And she'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. Or, you know, they'll say, Kamala Harris, the world is on the cusp of a major conflict. You've got a war in Asia, you've got a war in Europe, you've got war all over the place. What is your plan to restore peace and stability to a broken world? And she'll say, well, you know, when I worked at McDonald's, I was very good at making the hash browns. And, you know, those of us who, first of all, I think maybe Donald J. Trump has spent more time working at McDonald's than Kamala Harris has at this point, but who knows? Maybe she's telling us the truth. Maybe she's not. But here's the thing. If you cannot answer specific questions about what you want to do for the American people, then you have no business being near the Oval Office of the United States of America. We know what Kamala Harris is going to do because we know what Kamala Harris has already done. She cast the deciding vote on trillions of dollars of new spending. She bragged about being the last person in the room when important decisions were made over the last 4 years. We know what Kamala Harris is going to do because we know what Kamala Harris has already done. And I'd like to borrow a line from my running mate when we're going to say tomorrow to Kamala Harris, you are fired, go back to San Francisco where you belong, we don't need you in the White House. Now, I will say, I've asked you to say a prayer for Tim Walz, and I'm going to say something nice about Kamala Harris. Look at me, being all nice to the Democratic opposition here. But here's the thing I'll say about Kamala Harris. While, yes, she's done a lot of bad things, and she's screwed up in a whole lot of ways as Vice President of the United States, the one thing I'll say about Kamala Harris is that every time she gives an interview, I think we gain about 100,000 votes. And so, you know, what? I said this to the president a few weeks ago. You know, one of our closing campaign strategies, we should just get Kamala Harris out there doing as many interviews as possible, because that's how I think we're gonna persuade the people of Michigan. Because look, when she's got a teleprompter in front of her, she'll talk a big game about how she's going to be different. She'll say a lot about how she's nothing like Joe Biden. She'll even say things like, on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis affecting American families. And I think all of us with a lick of common sense are saying, Kamala, day one was 1,400 days ago. What the hell have you been doing the whole time? Stop talking about doing your job and go and do it. But here's the thing. Every now and then, she'll give an interview. And I don't know if you saw this, but a couple of weeks ago, she did an interview with The View. Have you guys seen this interview that she did with The View? A few of you have said no. A few of you said yes. Here's the thing. If you haven't seen that interview, I don't want you to see the interview until tomorrow, because we need you as sharp as possible in this last stretch. And you lose about 20 IQ points if you watch Kamala Harris on The View. But here's the thing. They ask her, you know, you're going around the country pretending you don't even know who Joe Biden is. What would you have done differently over the last 4 years? And Kamala Harris says, nothing comes to mind. That's a direct quote. Not a thing comes to mind that she would have done differently. Now, that could be, if we're being fair, that could be the slogan of the Harris-Walz campaign. Harris-Walz, nothing comes to mind. What would you... What are you going to do about that wide open southern border? Nothing comes to mind. What are you going to do to undo the broken economic policies that make groceries unaffordable? Nothing comes to mind. That could be, again, the slogan of their campaign, but what it revealed is the lie at the heart of the Kamala Harris campaign, because while she says that she's somehow going to be different, even though she can't give you the details on how, we know that Kamala Harris is more of the same. More of the same unaffordable groceries, more of the same unaffordable health care, more of the same wide open southern border, more of the same failed leadership in Washington, D.C. And I think that Michigan, tomorrow, we're going to vote for a change. We're going to vote to take this country in a new direction. We're going to vote for prosperity. We're going to vote for Donald J. Trump for President of the United States. It's, you know, here's the biggest problem with Kamala Harris. It's not just that we disagree with her on policy, it's that Kamala Harris has decided, instead of saying what she's gonna do to make your lives better, she's more focused on dishonest smears against Donald J. Trump, or more importantly, dishonest smears against the American people. For my entire time that I've paid attention to politics, I'm all of 40 years old, and you know, I used to talk about, I turned 40 in August of this year, right after Donald J. Trump made me his running mate, and I used to go out and complain about having just turned 40, and then, you know, people who had just turned 60 or just turned 70 said, why don't you shut the hell up about having just turned 40? So I stopped doing that. But in my entire life, I've never seen a political candidate not just criticize the other party or criticize the other candidate, but go out and attack millions upon millions of Americans for disagreeing with Kamala Harris. We saw this when Joe Biden, Kamala Harris's boss, called half of America garbage for wanting to think that Donald J. Trump should be president of the United States. You know, we had this great rally in Madison Square Gardens, really a celebration of America between the people inside and outside. We had close to 100,000 patriots celebrating the United States of America, and Tim Walz compared it to a Nazi rally in 1930. Even though, you know, I actually have met the guy. We had a Holocaust survivor who was at that rally there celebrating America and rallying in support of Donald J. Trump. They call the guy a Nazi who literally survived the Holocaust. Think about this. We don't need to attack our fellow citizens just because they have the wrong politics. And I'm sure every single person in this auditorium knows somebody who's going to vote the wrong way tomorrow. And I want to ask two things. First of all, try as hard as you can over the next 24 hours to make sure they vote the right way, because we got to get Donald J. Trump back in the White House. But here's what else. Even if people vote the wrong way, you know what? They're still our fellow citizens, and we're still going to fight for them anyway, because we love this country, and that means loving everybody who calls this place home. So reject the example of Kamala Harris. Reject somebody who wants to call us racist for believing that we should have a border. Reject calling our fellow citizens garbage because we think that Kamala Harris is doing a bad job. Because here's our simple message to Kamala Harris. No, our fellow citizens are not garbage for thinking that you're doing a terrible job, but tomorrow the state of Michigan is going to take out the trash in Washington, D.C. Let me just talk about two other issues because I know they're so important. And the first in particular is the great tradition of Michigan auto manufacturing. I love this state. I say this as a Buckeye, don't hold it against me, but I love the tradition of American craftsmanship represented by Flint, by Detroit, by the entire ecosystem of making great things here in the state of Michigan. You know, when Kamala Harris talks about the electric vehicle mandate, you know that would destroy 117,000 Michigan auto worker jobs. Because of course, it's not just the people, as you all know better than I do, it's not just the people who are assembling the automobiles, it's the people who are manufacturing the components, it's the supply chain, it's the carburetors, it's everything that goes in to that incredible Michigan-built car that makes us so proud, but also employs a lot of good middle-class jobs and a lot of good middle-class Americans. You know, we believe where Kamala Harris wants to destroy the Michigan auto industry with this electric vehicle mandate, you know what Donald J. Trump believes? He believes you ought to be able to drive whatever the hell car you want to because this is America and we believe in freedom. And we believe that when Americans are free to choose to drive whatever car they want to, they're going to choose great Michigan-made automobiles because they're the best vehicles in the world. And you know, Kamala Harris attacks Donald J. Trump all the time, and this is the biggest tell. She's betting on all of us not being smart enough to realize the game that she's playing, but when she attacks Donald J. Trump for wanting to impose tariffs to protect the Michigan auto industry, she's telling you exactly who she's going to fight for. She's going to fight for electric vehicles made in communist China. We're going to fight for Michigan auto workers and all of the middle-class families who depend on those jobs. Because here's the thing, if you are unwilling to apply pressure to communist China for not allowing Michigan automobiles to be sold all over the world, think about this. If you're a company and you want to employ a literal slave laborer in China to manufacture automobiles, and you're having a government that's going to reward people for buying those automobiles made in China, then reward people who are buying cars made in America, that's going to destroy the manufacturing economy in the state of Michigan and in the United States of America. Here's what a tariff, all it does is say that if you're a foreign company or you're a foreign corporation and you want to manufacture something with slaves in communist China, you're going to pay a big fat penalty if you try to bring that crap back in the United States of America. It's common sense. And the other thing that allows you to do is to negotiate with other companies so that we make sure that those great Michigan-made automobiles are being sold not just in North America, but all over the world. If you go to Europe, Mike Rogers knows this, you go to Europe, how many GMs, how many Fords do you see in Europe? None. Because for 40 years, and I hate to say it, in some ways it's been bipartisan, American leaders have refused to say to Europe, you have got to let great Michigan products into your markets. In 2 days, my friends, that changes because no more free ride for Europe and no more free ride for anybody else. We're going to sell everything all over the world because we make the best stuff. So while we're going to protect Michigan auto workers and we're going to protect their jobs, we're also going to fight for public safety in Michigan communities. And of all the things that Kamala Harris has done wrong, of course, I think the most broken policy of the last 4 years has been that wide open southern border. And just remember, 4 years ago, Kamala Harris came into office. She bragged about undoing Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. Kamala Harris bragged about stopping construction of that border wall. She bragged about re-implementing catch and release, which opened the American southern border more than any single thing that she's done. And now that she's done it, of course, what are the consequences? We're living with it every single day. I just came from Wisconsin earlier today. They arrested a Mexican drug cartel member who had committed sexual assault against a mother and her 12-year-old girl in Wisconsin. Think about how far we are in Wisconsin from the southern border. Here in Michigan, how many drug cartel members, how many sheriffs have I talked to who have told me that drug cartel members are getting rich off the fentanyl trade right here in the great state of Michigan? We're about as far away from the southern border as you could be, but Michigan is a border state thanks to Kamala Harris's broken policies. And here's a simple principle that will motivate Donald J. Trump's administration is when he is back in the White House, we're going to wage war against the Mexican drug cartels and stop this poison from coming in to Michigan communities. You know, a lot of you know my story. A lot of you know that I was raised by my grandmother because my own mom struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. Now, I'm proud of my mom, and she's been clean and sober for almost 10 years, and that's an incredible grace and an incredible blessing for my family. Thank you. But I often ask myself, what if the poison that Kamala Harris lets come across the border today had been coming across 15 years ago? Because I really think that we would have been deprived of that second chance that we got with my mother. All of those memories that we've been able to build with my 7-year-old, my 4-year-old, and my 2-year-old To them, she's the best grandma that they could have ever asked for. And that is a testament, of course, to the hope that does exist in recovery, but it's also a testament to what can happen when we fight for American citizens having second chances. For all of you who know somebody who's dealing with addiction, for all of you who know somebody who's had their life claimed by this terrible drug epidemic, I want you to know that when Donald J. Trump is back in the White House, you're going to have a fighter for you, for your families, for your second chances, because that's what we need in an American president. If you think of all the consequences of the border crisis, you think of the fentanyl, the poison that's coming into our communities at industrial scale, thanks to those drug cartels and thanks to Kamala Harris letting them do business in the state of Michigan. If you think about the public schools that have been overwhelmed because you've got thousands and thousands of kids who don't even speak English, who have been dropped in to our Michigan schools, which has, of course, made it harder for American citizens of every color to get the kind of education that they deserve. If you've gone to an emergency room, go to a hospital and ask yourself, what are the wait times compared to what they were 6 years ago? They've gone up everywhere because Kamala Harris has let in millions upon millions of people who don't have the legal right to be in this country. Now, I believe that the United States is the most generous country in the world. I believe that we are the most compassionate people anywhere in the world. But the compassion of the American president belongs to American citizens, to people who have the legal right to be here, not to people who shouldn't be here in the first place. And this is what's got to change about that broken border. This is what has to change about Kamala Harris's immigration policies, is if we continue to let millions upon millions of people into this country illegally every single year, it's going to bankrupt our municipalities. It's going to deprive American children of the chance at a good education. It's going to mean that we've got millions of American families who are losing their loved ones because of the poison that's coming into our communities. It's going to mean longer wait times at our hospitals. It's going to mean that Social Security and Medicare go bankrupt because Kamala Harris is promising to give Social Security and Medicare benefits to illegal aliens. I happen to think those benefits ought to go to the American citizens who have been paying into them for their entire lives. So while Kamala Harris is rolling out the red carpet and offering free medical care, free health care, free housing, and free schooling to people who don't have the legal right to be in this country, Donald J. Trump's message is a little bit different. If you're in this country illegally, pack your bags, because in 3 months you're going back home. Now I want to close with just a couple of final requests here, and I know we're actually headed to Georgia, and then we're going to finish the day in Pennsylvania. And I know the president's got 4 separate events today, and it's so funny to compare and contrast the record and the campaign stretch of Kamala Harris versus Donald J. Trump. I think that she's in 1 state today. She's in 1 state. President Trump is in 3 states, maybe 4 states today, and I'm in 4. And it's interesting, for all the media lies about Donald J. Trump and for all of the Kamala Harris dishonesty about my running mate, I think that we've got one person in this race who's got the energy to be president of the United States, and it's the guy who's barnstorming the country. That's Donald J. Trump. But I think especially at this cycle, this point of the race, it's very easy to get tunnel vision. It's very easy to focus on just the politics and not on what's at stake. Because look, this is not just about red team versus blue team, Republicans versus Democrats. We've got a lot of independents, Democrats, and Republicans as part of this team, and we're thrilled to have them. If you believe in common sense, if you want government that actually belongs to the American people, then you got to vote for the common sense ticket of Donald J. Trump. It's that simple. But look, this is not just about beating Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And trust me, more than any person in this auditorium, I am looking forward to beating Kamala Harris and the Democrats. Trust me, I'm going to enjoy it more than anybody else in this room. But here's why we got to beat Kamala Harris and the Democrats tomorrow. It's because the American people deserve to have better leadership. It's really that simple. And I wish that I could take all of you and give you the perspective over the United States of America that I've gotten over the last 3 months. I can't overstate how overwhelmed with gratitude I am at the generosity and the greatness of the American people. And I love you too. And I got to tell you, let me just offer a few observations, tell you a few stories of people that I've met along the way. I met a woman a few weeks ago, actually in the state of Michigan, but a much more rural part of the state of Michigan, who told me in a photo line before I did a rally up there, she said, I can't afford groceries. She was talking to me about her financial struggles, and then she walked me through the names of my children. First, middle, and last. She knew every single one of their 3 names because she says a prayer for all of us every single night. A woman who can't afford groceries prays for me and my children and my wife every single night. I met a woman who told me that for 40 years, she and her husband had this ritual they loved. They did steak night every Friday night. But last year, because thanks to Kamala Harris's policies, the cost of groceries just got too expensive, that she canceled steak night. She said, you know what? We're just going to eat ground beef instead. And I thought what a tragedy it was that our fellow citizens are canceling these little family rituals, the things that make life worth living, because Kamala Harris has failed to do her job. I've met so many parents of teenagers who have lost their children because a teenager went to a party and he did something or she did something that a lot of teenagers do. They took something under peer pressure. And unfortunately, because the Mexican drug cartels have brought so much poison into our country, that thing that they took under peer pressure was laced with fentanyl. And so instead of paying for that teenage mistake with a headache or a lecture the next morning, they paid for that teenage mistake with their lives. When you look at how much this country is struggling, and you think about the golden age of prosperity that we could unleash, we've got to go and do it, my friends. And over the next day, as we're working hard for the people of Michigan, working hard for everybody, getting people to the polls, telling our neighbors, our friends and family, offering to drive them to their polling location if that's what it takes. I want you to remember that what we're fighting for is we're fighting for a retiree being able to afford steak night with their husband. We're fighting for the parents of children to be able to raise their children in communities that are safe and secure. We're fighting for people to be able to afford groceries. We're fighting for our fellow citizens because they deserve to have an American president that is fit to lead this great nation. And my friends, tomorrow, that's exactly what we're going to give them. God bless you all, Michigan. Thank you. I'll be back soon, but we got to go win this thing. We love you.
Send it on down the line. Hello, Pittsburgh, still mill worker. Let me thank you for your time. You work a 40-hour week for a living. Just to send it on down the line. This is for the one who swings the hammer, driving home the nail. For the one behind the counter, ringing up the sales. For the one who fights the fires, the one who brings the mail, for everyone who works behind the scenes. You can see them every morning in the factories and the fields, in the city streets and the quiet country towns, working together like
country as well. So what we are going to do is we'll take our final break of the hour. We are expecting in the next hour coming up in just moments, Donald Trump rally